Hi everyone, me again. So this is going to be my last video for the day, hopefully. But I figured I'd get this done as well while I had the camera set up in the right spot for it. This is my mini bath time by Hayes that I am stitching 2/1, 28 count in tent stitch. Now I'm doing a modified tent. I will put a link in the description below for Carolyn Mazzeo's tutorial on a proper Continental tent stitch. I started this chart doing a proper Continental stitch up here in this top corner. And the purpose behind doing a traditional Continental tent stitch instead of just half stitches is that the Continental stitch prevents your fabric from warping or pulling to one side when you're stitching. But I found that the traditional Continental stitch was a bit cumbersome. It was hard to remember where my needle was going next, and I found it to be very thick on the back of my fabric. And so I'll flip this over so you can see the back. Here's the back. So the traditional Continental stitch is meant to give you more coverage, but it's meant also so that your stitches are going opposite on the back of the leg of your stitch on the front. So that way technically you're still getting an X and your fabric doesn't warp, and it gives you a bit of extra coverage. Hopefully so your fabric won't show through your stitches on the front as well. But I found this really bulky. And as you can see, my tent, the modified tent that I'm using, doesn't give you that same bulkiness or that same coverage on the back. But on the front, it looks no different. It looks no different, and my fabric is not pulling or warping. I've got 3/4 of a page done now on this mini chart. And my fabric is off the hoop, and as you can see, there's no pulling or warping. The seam is still straight. So this modified version of tent that I'm doing seems to be working okay for me. It's not to say it's going to work for everybody. If your stitch tension is tighter than mine, it may not work the same for you. But I thought I'd put this tutorial out there just to show you how I'm doing this. So, for the purposes of showing you, I'm going to use this really large fabric. I think this is like 11 count or something, and like a cream. Let's pretend this is my chart. Here's my 10 by 10 block. Okay, all the X's are going to be my blue thread. All my circles are going to be my pink thread. And I'm doing half stitches, right? So I'm doing tent stitch. How I do this modified is that on the outside of my chart, like on the edge going right up and down the entire chart, I put a dot at every second row the whole way down my page. That dot signifies that, to me, that the stitches on that row, so all of these stitches here in this row, are all going to slant. I'm going to come up through the bottom left and go down through the top right. So I'm working in that direction. Okay? Then I would come up through the bottom again, go down through the top. That's what that dot means to me. Every row that doesn't have a dot, like this row here, I'm doing the opposite. I'm going up through the top and going down through the bottom left, up through the top, down through the bottom left. So that way I always have a row that's pulling my fabric to the right, and I always have a row that's pulling my fabric to the left. Even though my stitches all look the same on the front, I'm stitching them in opposite directions. And I always do it that way. So even though I have 3 stitches here, I wouldn't drop down and do 3 stitches here in the same direction going to the right. and then do these to the right. I do these to the right, these to the right, and then work these back going to the left. So I'll show you that. So let's say I'm going to start here. I wonder if I can zoom in a little bit. There we go. So again, I'm going to start with a loop start because I'm using 2 strands of floss. There's my loop. Go back down through the top. So there's my first half stitch. So it looks like I have 3 half stitches here. Then I'm going to skip the 3 circles. So skip 3 stitches. Put in my other 2 X's, or my other 2 blue stitches on that top row. There. So I have my 3, I skipped 3, and then I have my 2. Now I'm going to work backwards. So now I'm going to go down to the next row. I'm going out here to this last stitch. Okay. I'm going to come up through the top of the stitch and go down through the bottom left this time. Then I'm going to skip a stitch and put in these 3 stitches up through my top right, down to my bottom left, up to my top right, down to my bottom left, up to the top right, down to the bottom left. Then I'm going to skip these stitches here. This row, because the dot is an up row, so I'm going to come in 3 stitches. Okay, and I'm going to put these 3 stitches in going from bottom left now to top right. Bottom left, top right. Skip these 3 stitches and put in this stitch, bottom left, top right. So now that row is done. This row does not have a dot next to it right here. So this again would signify I'm going from top to bottom now with my stitches. So this row I'm going to go from top right, bottom left. Top right, bottom left, skip these 3 stitches, top right, bottom left, top right, bottom left. There we go. That's those 3 stitches. Then the last row, I'm working all the way across. I don't know if you can see that. I'm working all the way across, and I'm doing the entire thing from bottom left to top right, because there's a dot here and it tells me I need to go that way. So that's my first color done. I'm just going to finish off this row and I'll come back and show you the next one. Okay, so those colors are done. Or that color is done. Now I'm going to go in where all the circles are on my little chart and put in my next color. So starting here at this top row, because there's a dot on this top row, I know I'm going from bottom left to top right. And I'm going to start with a loop start again. And this time I'm actually going to put in a 3rd color, I've decided, just to show you how I fill something in. I thought about that after. So we'll put in these 3 stitches, bottom left to top right, go over to these ones, bottom left to top right. Okay, this one's going down now, so we're going to go top right to bottom left, Again, top right to bottom left, the whole way across. I think you're getting the idea of what I mean by working my rows separately. Top right to bottom left. So every single stitch, even though I've used two separate colors, every single stitch in this row, the blue ones or the pink ones, they've all been stitched from top right to bottom left. And this row here has all been stitched from bottom left to top right. So I'm constantly pulling a row in a particular direction, no matter how many colors are in that row. So for example, on this row now, I'm working all of these ones from bottom left to top right. But when I get down to the next row, you'll notice on my little chart there, I've colored 2 stitches green. Those 2 stitches, we're going to pretend those are actually different color. So those 2 circles represent a different color. So this first stitch right here, I'm going to go top right to bottom left. Then I'm skipping these 2. Okay. I'm going to go put in these stitches over here. And then I'm going to put in these 2 here, and that's done. I'm going to thread my needle with that color that I need just for those 2 stitches alone and show you how I fill in those stitches. Okay, so just like any large chart, and you've got confetti stitches, these are going to represent a couple of confetti stitches that I need to add in. Okay? And normally your thought process, if you typically stitch from bottom left to top right, is going to be to fill those in that manner. However, because we're trying to keep the tension in each row going in the same direction per row, if you look here, you will see that that row doesn't have a dot. So to me, that signifies that my stitch needs to go from top right to bottom left. So I have to stitch those stitches in the same as I've done these ones. Top right to bottom left. So I'm going to start in the top right of this one and come up through the bottom left to do my loop start. Okay, then I'll go back down through my bottom left here to pull the loop through. And then I'll go up through my top right here and down through my bottom left again. So now those 2 stitches have been completed, but they've been completed in the exact same direction as every other stitch in this row. That's why I put these dots all down the margin of my chart when I'm working in this modified manner. So instead of working backwards on myself, I'm still getting the pull in the same manner. These stitches are all going to pull left to right, and these stitches in this row are all going to pull right to left. These stitches will all pull left to right, these ones from right to left, these ones from left to right. So my fabric is still getting even, you know, it's getting pulled in 2 opposite directions, but instead of doing it as an X on one row, it's just doing it, it's doing the X that way. It's doing the X in 2 separate rows. So far I have not had an issue with doing my tent stitch this way. It is not warping my fabric. You just need to be consistent about doing your rows. And like I say, the easiest way I found is just to put a dot on my chart just to mark them. I hope that helps. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. Have a great day. Happy stitching.